Our reading today comes from Luke's Gospel. It's Luke chapter 12 and verses 32 to 40. Quite a complicated structure to this particular chapter, and the piece that we have today is very much in the middle of lots of other things that are intertwined. So chapter 12 started with a section of teaching in Luke where he says, as thousands of people crowded together, Jesus teaches them. But in this particular part of that chapter, he's talking to the disciples. And the prelude to our reading is that Jesus has talked to them about the need to trust in God as their firm foundation. So to trust in God above all other things, that the most important thing, the persistent thing, is the relationship they have with God and the free gift of love that God has given them. And so what we have here is a prelude to three sections that are linked together that talk about what's going to happen when Jesus is crucified and then rises again, and the implications that will have for the disciples, the implications it will have for all people who follow Jesus, and for the implications that it'll have for the people of Israel. We only have the first of those three in this reading today. So, our reading. Jesus says to the disciples, do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell all your belongings and give the money to the poor. Provide for yourself purses that don't wear out, and save your riches in heaven, where they will never decrease, because no thief can get to them, and no moth can destroy them. For your heart will always be where your riches are. Be ready for whatever comes, dressed for action and with your lamps lit, like servants who are waiting for their master to come back from a wedding feast. When he comes and knocks, they will open the door for him at once. How happy are those servants whose master finds them awake and ready when he returns. I tell you, he will take off his coat, ask them to sit down, and will wait on them. How happy they are if he finds them ready, even if he should come at midnight or even later. And you can be sure that if the owner of a house knew the time when the thief would come, he would not let the thief break into his house. And you too must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you are not expecting him. So, what we've got here is Jesus using picture language to describe the fact that in his person, God has come in human form, and the good news and the kingdom of heaven are here. Behind and through all this section is the whole idea of how the church, at the time when Luke assembled his gospel, were wrestling with the concept of Jesus' return. Because by the time, of course, the gospel was written, Jesus had been crucified, raised, the mission of the disciples had spread throughout the Mediterranean, and the numbers of Christians were growing and growing. And people were dying, and who had seen Jesus or heard the first message. And so people were beginning to think, well, hold on a moment, maybe Jesus isn't coming again anytime soon. Whereas, of course, for the first disciples, it was like, well, any second. And so this kind of teaching about being watchful is very relevant, because people would say, well, okay, well, when do we need to be watchful by? And what are we waiting for? And in the early creeds, which were written, of course, many, many, many years after the Gospels, there is a specific reference, isn't there, to the fact that the church believes that God will come again in the fulfillment of time. So it's a really interesting debate, which isn't our core subject today, to talk about what you think about the second coming, what that means, when it's going to happen. What Luke is saying here, in stark contrast to Matthew's gospel, the way he assembles his material, is very much a focus on the here and now. Back to Mark's first words of Jesus, the right time has come and the kingdom of heaven is near. Turn away from your sins and believe the good news. It's now. It's at the end of your nose. It's not future time. It's now. The decision is here. our reading starts with Jesus saying to the disciples, "Do not be afraid, little flock. Your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom." First and most important thing. Now look, whatever else happens in life, be filled with joy, because God's grace has come to you. The good news about love, forgiveness, pardon, and freedom are now. They're here right now. It's a gift. And in response to that enormous gift, as we hear in so many parables, the field of great price, the lost coin, the lost sheep, all of those things where people are seeking something of immense value, Jesus is saying, look, this gift of grace from God is the most perfect possession you will ever own. And when he goes on to say, sell your belongings and give your money to the poor, blah, 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 provide for yourself purses that don't wear out. It taps into a reading we've had immediately before this, which is all about your riches and what you trust in. And this lovely picture language about the fact that, the birds don't bother about where the food's coming from, or the flowers don't dress themselves. God does it all for them. Back to this idea that God is all and everything you ever need. So stop worrying about these ephemeral things. So in this particular first part where he says about give your money to the poor, he's really talking about the purses. You could spend all your time with your money bag tied around your waist or whatever people did in those days and be worried about it. And, oh gosh, someone's going to steal it. Where can I leave it at night? Should I wear it openly? It's still the same problems that people face today in terms of, well, what do I do when I'm carrying my wealth with me? The thing I find important, the thing I have of value. And Jesus is saying, well, look, God's gift of the kingdom is so much more important than that. I mean, no one's saying that isn't important, but it's so much more important than that. The most precious thing you carry around with you always is your knowledge and conviction that God loves you and that the kingdom has come to you and that you are filled with joy because of it. That's the most important thing. So much better than anything else that you will be willing to give away your money, completely do without it, because God's gift is better than money. And that's what he's saying. It's picture language, not rules necessarily that tell you how to actually live your life today. Now, I'm not wimping out about the idea that money is a hold on people, and it definitely is, because obviously for many of us, there is a line where our generosity and our extravagance of the things we believe we own will, cross the line, and we'll think, well, we can't do that, it's too much. But it shouldn't be that way, and we should feel bad about it, because anytime, anywhere, we say our possessions, our wealth, our time is indeed ours, very much like last week's reading about the parable of the rich fool. My fields, my crops, my barns, all this stuff, very me-centric. Then we've lost the plot. If that means we stop being kind to people, or we stop doing nice things to other people, or we stop caring about other people, because it is in the giving of things that we actually find the true wealth of things. And Jesus talks about watchfulness then, and these two illustrations of the servants who are always ready for their master to come home, and the person who, spinning it on its head, if they knew when a thief was coming, they'd be there to stop them coming in. Being watchful, being alert. Because the call here is to put God at the center of all your lives, echoes of the great commandment here, and be ready to love your neighbor as yourself always and everywhere. It is literally a retelling of the great commandment, because being watchful means not walking along in a daze, not seeing where there is need, not seeing where there is an opportunity to share that love that God has given you, entrusted to you, as well as the breath you breathe and the day you live, which is also entrusted to you. What opportunities are there going to be for you to share that with other people? Be alert always. Not so much for the fact that God will come again in the fullness of time and make all things new and everyone will be brought into heaven. It's just interesting theology, and it depends how you feel about that particular concept. For Luke, in his context, it was less about the future. It's about now. It's about the imminent need to respond in your own life to what God has given you, this amazing free gift. The challenge is always going to be, what are you going to do in response to a situation? Because unless we sit ourselves, I don't know, in a bubble somewhere, completely cut off from everybody else in the world, like one of the desert fathers in their holes in a cave, we will find opportunities or challenges to share the love that God has given us. People will cross our paths. Situations will present themselves to us. If we're busy in the world, then things will happen to us and we will have to respond. And responding can mean choosing not to respond. You know, we make a response. Is it going to be positive, or is it going to be neutral, or is it going to not do anything at all? And that is still a response. So it's really important that we understand the gift we have been given. Be pleased, the Father is pleased to give you the kingdom, he says to the disciples. And so it is to us, that God's free gift of love has come to us, and we need to decide how we're going to react to the people around us who need things from us. Are we going to be always alert to their need or not? And that's a daily 24/7, minute by minute, second by second crisis that we face in our lives. Without the knowledge of God's love, we could drift through life being completely self-obsessed, thinking we are the center of the universe, in control of everything in our lives, and master of all we survey, custodian of all the riches we've accumulated, and how happy we would be. But remember, like the rich fool, that when we die, that all just goes. There are riches to be had in the service of others, empowered by the knowledge that we are loved by God. That's the most precious thing.